One to Let's Talk Education, the Faculty of Education Community Speaker Series. I'm Perry Klein. I'm the Associate Dean of Research in the Faculty of Education. We'll begin this evening with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Western University is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenapehouk, and the Attawandaron peoples, on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors to our society. I want to begin tonight by thanking Jen Heidenheim. Jen is the person who organized this evening's event, and so if you received an email or talked with someone on the phone, it was probably Jen Heidenheim. Our talk this evening is on STEM, social skills, and students with developmental disabilities, and the speakers are Nicole Neal and Anton Puvirajah. Nicole Neal is a professor in the applied psychology area in the Faculty of Education, and her teaching and research focuses on applied behavioral analysis and students with developmental disorders. Dr. Anton Puvirajah is a professor in the area of curriculum studies in the Faculty of Education, and his research focuses on STEM education and teacher education. As I said, they'll be talking tonight about STEM, social skills, and students with developmental disabilities. If you have questions, we encourage you to write those in the chat function, and periodically we'll pause so that they can answer those. Okay, and now I'll turn things over to Nicole and Anton. Welcome.
Thanks, Perry. I'll start us off, and then I'll volley back to Anton and back to me, kind of a little bit of back and forth. We're really excited to talk to you tonight about some of our work in the area of STEM and social skills and students with developmental disabilities. This is a project that Anton and I have been working together on over the past year and a bit, and it's been a really exciting opportunity to work together as an interdisciplinary team. So our presentation today is going to focus on some of the work that we've done and some of the practical pieces that might be applied with perhaps students that you're working with currently. And there's a wide variety of fields that appear to have RSVP'd and come together. So we'll try and introduce whichever topics you may or may not be familiar with, whether that's STEM topics or whether that's a little bit about developmental disabilities. So we'll start off just a brief introduction to students with developmental disabilities. Anton's going to talk to you about STEM and STEM education and what that looks like within our program that we've developed, the S3 program. I'll talk to you a little bit about social skills and the program, and then we'll end with some of the reflections from our most recent implementation of the program. Students with developmental disabilities or intellectual and developmental disabilities, it's a broad category, and students included in our programs include those with developmental disabilities such as autism and Down syndrome and fetal alcohol spectrum, and then as well as individuals who may or may not have intellectual disabilities. Developmental disabilities refers to those with functional limitations in either physical learning, language, or behavior domains with an early onset. And similarly, intellectual disabilities is more specific to intellectual functioning combined with some adaptive functioning deficits that also appear early in childhood. So this sort of broad spectrum of disabilities we generally see occurring, you know, around 2%. When we think about autism, we're seeing numbers around 1 in 66, with some variability depending on how that's measured. And all of these diagnoses have different presentations, so the abilities may vary across the different disabilities and across different individuals. We often see things like difficulties in reasoning, learning, problem solving, as well as some difficulties in social and practical skills associated with these diagnoses. And individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities experience a number of barriers to participation, particularly in activities such as STEM, and we'll talk about it in that specific context, but we see this across a lot of different domains as well. So there are some personal characteristics associated with the diagnosis, things like difficulty with working memory or reasoning or planning or problem solving might be a challenge to accessing STEM instruction or academic instruction. They might find it challenging to complete multi-step experiments within the classroom because of the way that traditional teaching of STEM is presented to them. And when we look at some of the research in that area, we find that without additional support, things like inquiry-based instruction, which Anton's going to talk a little bit about, is difficult for individuals with developmental disabilities to access without additional supports. We also see a really strong relationship between social skills and academic performance. So students who have difficulty with communication, social rules, these individuals experience more barriers when they want to go into things like post-secondary education, more difficulties transitioning from middle school to high school to college or university. And students who have trouble conversing or a little bit of trouble conversing students who have no trouble conversing are more likely to major in STEM than peers who have trouble or lots of trouble or lack of conversation skills. And then we also see a lot of environmental barriers to participation for students with developmental disabilities. So when we think about traditional approaches to teaching this population, previous curricula really focused on life and functional skills rather than academic engagement. And much of the research that is present on teaching science and STEM to students with developmental disabilities focuses a lot on content or specific subject matter rather than more complex processes and practices within the field. And so having this repertoire of skills, it has the potential to increase quality of life and independence, but they need that additional support in order to engage in these academic and STEM instruction. And there's desire among students with developmental disabilities. So surveys and research looking at students with ASD, their parents and themselves indicate a desire to go to post-secondary. They show a greater ratio of interest in STEM compared to those without developmental disabilities. And so we see a clear gap between sort of the hopes and the needs and the abilities and then the availability of resources designed to assist them in making that decision to enter the STEM field. So with that introduction, I'm going to pass it over to Anton so that he can talk a little bit about why the focus on STEM as opposed to other topics of interest.
Thank you, Nicole. Good evening, all. My name is Anton. My research interest is in getting underrepresented and minoritized students to engage in STEM learning, primarily through informal experiences. Before meeting Nicole, I think that was about 5 years ago, And before coming to Western, I have primarily focused my research on African American and Latinx students' informal STEM experiences. This was in the United States. But then there was this one day here at Western almost 5 years ago. I got this email from Nicole asking me whether I'd be interested in developing a collaborative research program or a study that brings together STEM and individuals with autism. And as they say, well, we're here now. So what is STEM? STEM is really an interdisciplinary and an integrated way of looking at science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This view goes beyond our traditional view of looking at school science and mathematics, for example, as distinct areas. So in STEM education or STEM learning, students' engagement occurs where two or more of these fields or disciplines come together and present them with a near authentic representation of how the real world works. That is, in the real world, in the world outside of the classroom, you don't necessarily have science or mathematics or engineering as separate entities or separate disciplines. We would find them as entangled and intertwined. For example, in our with our students in the program, our students with ASD, they took part in learning about buoyancy, a concept related to floating and sinking. But as they were learning about buoyancy, by designing and testing boats to carry a certain load, they were also incorporating concepts from science, from mathematics, engineering, and technology. They were really motivated in doing this activity. So we call these types of activity real activities, meaning these activities were relevant, engaging, and authentic. So relevant, engaging, and authentic learning was happening as they were participating in these activities. I think it's important for us to maybe briefly discuss why we are focusing on STEM. Literacies associated with STEM are important for all students, not only for students interested in pursuing further studies in STEM or careers in STEM. Our everyday lives are filled with things, ideas, and concepts associated with and influenced by STEM. For example, you can look at the past year and the pandemic and how STEM is entangled and intertwined with all things related to that. Understanding of STEM and its practices allows individuals to be critical thinkers and make sound, evidence-based, logical life decisions. So in addition, engaging in STEM also develops overall abilities and literacies in other areas as well, including communication, social skills, creativity. Engaging in STEM also builds up confidence and develops self-efficacy, not only in distinct STEM areas like science and mathematics by itself, but more importantly, it builds confidence and develops self-efficacy in solving and tackling everyday STEM-related issues. These issues, like I said, become entangled issues that require a multidisciplinary approach. Participating in STEM also enables individuals to seriously consider STEM for further studies or as a possible career option to become the next generation innovators. One of the issues with STEM and STEM education is that I think we still need to work on broadening the participation. So as Canada is enriched by its diverse population, we must work to ensure that all are afforded just and high-value STEM learning opportunities. So these opportunities have the potential to build STEM and associated literacy capacities in individuals. And when that happens, this will allow them to thrive economically and also socially as well. but an often neglected and marginalized sector of the Canadian population in this regard are minoritized students, including students with developmental disabilities. So minoritized students, including students with developmental disabilities, they tend to have inadequate and superficial STEM learning experiences in schools. And this is due to, what I like to say is, this is due to hegemonic practices that view those with disabilities as abnormal, inferior, or unequal. So quite often, the type of learning that happens in schools for students with developmental disabilities are superficial, unchallenging, and they tend to be sometimes mediocre. For example, students with developmental disabilities spend more time than needed in learning life skills or being in life skill courses at schools. And this has a cost, they lose out on more intellectually stimulating, challenging, and growth-oriented experiences in other subject areas, including STEM subject areas. So while we know it's important for all children to engage in high quality and meaningful learning activities that help them gain knowledge, skills, and dispositions to successfully participate in society, the reality is that minoritized students and students belonging to non-dominant groups have marginalized learning experience. So in order to enrich the learning opportunities and experiences for students with developmental disabilities and to level the playing field, we need to think about an equity-based and an agentic approach to STEM learning experiences. So an equity-based approach focuses on giving all children opportunities to live, develop, and reach their full potential without discrimination, without bias, or favoritism. And this idea is consistent with the Convention of the Rights of the Child. So in terms of STEM learning, an equity-based approach focuses on eliminating unfair and avoidable circumstances that deprive children from participating in socially and intellectually rich STEM experiences. That also, at the same time, works to develop their full potential. An agentic approach to STEM learning focuses on letting children decide what STEM experience they want to participate in, how they want to participate in that experience, and when they want to participate, and also to what extent, for how much, for how long. So in a sense, they get to have the agency and the ownership for their STEM experiences. So one such equity-based and agentic approach is to provide students with opportunities to participate in high-quality, informal, out-of-school learning spaces that extend and enhance their informal in-school learning. We want to acknowledge that while formal in-school learning spaces continue to be important places where STEM learning happens, where social skills are developed, these sites also become problematic for students with developmental disabilities. And one of the reasons for this is that schools tend to normalize the philosophies, practices, ideals, and the values of the dominant group, which are not necessarily aligned with the philosophies, the practices, ideals, and the values of the children who are marginalized. So informal out-of-school learning spaces tend not to have the many institutional barriers. For example, informal spaces do not have these mandated curriculum, there's no assessment, there's no attendance requirement, so there's no high stakes, for example. So that informal spaces offer more flexibility to design STEM spaces, STEM learning spaces that are equity-based and agentic. Informal learning also allows students to take part in experiences that are also personally meaningful to them, and it allows them to choose the learning activities that they want to take part in and decide on their own the extent to which they want to take part in that learning activity. So here are some characteristics of the informal learning experiences. I'm not going to go through the list too much. I'll just go down the list. So it's learner motivated, guided by learner interest, and voluntary and personal. All four kind of belong together. It's learner centered. It's ongoing. It's contextually relevant, so it's meaningful for them. It's collaborative and nonlinear and open-ended. Open-ended means there's no right or wrong in participating in informal experiences. You try, you explore, and along the way you learn something as well. So let me briefly speak about the STEM skills program. So the STEM social skills program, we call it S3, is the program that both Nicole and I are involved in. It's an outreach program and also a research program that resulted from the interdisciplinary collaborative efforts of a small group of researchers and practitioners in the field of applied behavior analysis. That's what Nicole is in, and STEM education. The aim of the program is to simultaneously provide a space for supporting students with ASD to develop their STEM competencies and social skills, and also offer a venue for undertaking interdisciplinary research that brings together expertise from ABA and STEM education. One of the reasons that we came together to develop this program is that we noticed that there's very little interdisciplinary work that was being undertaken in the area of ABA and curriculum studies, especially STEM education. Too often we see ABA professionals doing their own thing with their clients, and then STEM educators on their own working with their students separately. So we wanted to leverage the interdisciplinary expertise to provide students with an immersive and authentic STEM and social skills learning experience through the STEM program. So as mentioned, one of the major aims of the STEM program is to develop the STEM competencies and social skills of students. So I'll briefly talk on the subject of STEM competencies. So when we use the term competencies, we usually refer to the knowledge, skills, and the dispositions of a particular domain or a field or a profession. In the literature, there are slightly different ways STEM competencies are characterized. I think we can all agree, though, that to be competent in STEM, subject matter knowledge is important. But we probably know that just knowing the subject matter alone is not enough to be competent in STEM. So the following are some essential STEM competencies. One is problem solving. STEM problems require us to quickly make sense of problems and work productively to propose real and appropriate solutions. Creativity is important in STEM. It requires us to look at and propose solutions to a problem through multiple approaches, including ones that are highly creative, out of the box, one that could be problematic. And another STEM competency is inquiry skills. Students are the drivers of the solutions, and they should be asking questions in inquiry. They should be proposing their ideas, generating and testing the solutions, and making decisions based on data to understand how to refine ideas further. Of course, STEM, you will definitely need the math and the science skills. So you need that foundational knowledge to participate, effectively in STEM. Another competency is, engineering design thinking. Here, students identify the problem, for example, and they research, possible solutions. But not just that, but they then build prototype and, build and test it, redesign it, test it again, and iterate it further as, as the need arises. Each step in the process moves the student closer to creating a functional solution. Critical thinking is also an important STEM competence. it's a type of thinking where you analyze information, evaluate designs, and reflect on your thinking, synthesize new ideas, and propose creative solutions. And lastly, collaboration. Working on STEM problems also involves learning to work with people. Learning to work as a productive part of a collaborative team. Teamwork, social skills are important in collaboration, and of course in doing STEM. So the S3 program, through their various activities, what happens is in the S3 program, students are involved in developing their STEM competencies and also their social skills in a more authentic way. They're doing STEM. While they're doing STEM, they're also developing their social skills. So our aim in the S3 program is to develop students' inquiry skills. So as students develop their inquiry skills, other STEM competencies also have a tendency to be developed as well. So what do we mean by inquiry? So inquiry is an approach to teaching and learning that places the students' questions, their ideas, and observations at the center of the learning experience. So educators are playing an active role throughout the process by establishing a culture where ideas are respectfully challenged, ideas are tested, redefined, and viewed as improvable. Sometimes, people think of inquiry as, well, let the students do whatever they want, let them inquire, and students, the teachers, sit back. No, so inquiry does not mean that. Inquiry doesn't mean that we as educators let the students do whatever they want to do. It requires a lot of educator planning. It requires a lot of facilitation. The reason for this is that inquiry needs to be modeled and scaffolded by the educator. Learners need to know how to ask questions, how to make observations, how to test their ideas, how to defend their propositions with evidence. All these need to be taught. They need to be modeled. They need to be scaffolded, and that's where the facilitator, that's where the educator, plays an important role. So we can think of inquiry as a continuum. So going from in this picture, going from left to right, learners become more independent for their learning. So on the left side, the picture may be tiny on your screen. On the left side, there's a teacher, the person with the hat is driving the learning, and the learner sits and lets the teacher take them to their learning destination, whatever that destination may be. So it's highly teacher-driven. The teacher decides, where to take that student to. What we notice here is that there's very little learner involvement and very little agency on the part of the learner because the teacher is doing everything. So as you progressively move toward the right, the learner takes more and more an active role in the lesson and the learning. The learner is becoming more independent. And as you can see at the last picture, on the rightmost picture, it's the learner who's driving the lesson or driving the learning. So, but we need to understand that most learners start on the left side of the continuum. And depending on the support for inquiry that they get from their teachers or caregivers in terms of modeling and scaffolding, they move toward the right. We need to understand and also expect that different learners will have different rates of progression toward independent inquiry. Sometimes, folks think that inquiry skills are difficult or even impossible for students with developmental disabilities to learn. However, we take the view that we need to realize the full potential of the child, and we need to offer the child with opportunities and experiences to develop their inquiry skills to the best of their abilities. Some students may not become independent inquirers, and that's fine. The important thing is that they need to be moving along that continuum. They don't need to come to that number 4 car. So in our S3 program, we modeled and scaffolded a lot of inquiry. Model inquiry means making thinking that goes behind the inquiry process visible and audible, thinking aloud. So for example, we post a lot of questions, a lot of open-ended questions to scaffold our students' thinking. So what you see on the right-hand side are a series of educator questions and possible learner answers. And this goes on and on to get at this idea, this science idea, let's say, matter occupies space. I won't spend too much time, but open-ended questions are really important for inquiry, but also for scaffolding inquiry as well. And it's also good to, in modeling inquiry, it's also good to model to the learners how to plan, how to make observations, and how to reflect on their learning. We also introduced, in modeling, we also introduced tasks and activities in which students use their prior knowledge to generate new ideas and explore questions and possibilities. The buoyancy activity is an example of that. They were familiar with sinking and floating, and we used that familiarity as a stepping stone for exploring and extending the idea of sinking and floating to a more sophisticated idea of buoyancy. So before I turn it over to Nicole, I just want to also briefly highlight what we mean by scaffolding. We can think of scaffolding as these intermediate steps that the educator provides the learner so that the learner can ultimately reach the learning outcome. You see that in this picture here. Here it is. You've got this learning outcome here, whatever's at the top, and you can see here in the learner, it's going to be pretty much impossible for the learner to get to that. But providing on the right-hand side, but by providing adequate scaffolding and intermediate steps, the learner is able to reach that learning outcome. And that's what in general terms what scaffolding is about. I will now, I think, turn it over to Nicole.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to sort of transition from some of the STEM ideas to talk a little bit about some of the social skills pieces within the program. And I think the nice part, you'll see maybe slightly different language, but we're really talking about the same kinds of strategies of breaking down skills and gradually building, in behavior analysis, we might think of those as task analyses. So a lot of overlap in these ideas on how to teach and bringing them together sort of with this two sets of language. So first thing to think about is what skills do we teach? We draw on a few different sources of information in order to pick what social skills to teach. So looking at some of the ratings and checklists that are out there, things like the social responsiveness scale and the autism social skills profile, and then standardized measures as well. And then also looking at the specific demands of the environment that they're in, and involving the student in thinking about some of those social skills priorities. So what do they enjoy, what do they value, and what do they find meaningful? And engaging in those discussions with the student as well. And then also considering the social validity of that. So when we're selecting and prioritizing social skills goals, not just the students' priorities, but also families, members, and in our case, we spoke with the parents about some of their goals and aspirations as well. Within the program, our first iteration of it, we focused on a few different social skills, accepting compliments, accepting criticism, offering assistance, fulfilling requests, and maintaining conversation. These were chosen based on some of those sources of information that I mentioned before, as well as looking at the literature on social skills that had been taught in the context of vocational skills for individuals with disabilities. So these were commonly addressed skills when we're thinking about workplace, kind of collaborative work environments, which we might think of as a STEM setting as part of. And then we can think about how do we actually teach these different skills. So we draw on two evidence-based procedures for teaching social skills. The first is social skills groups. There's a large variety of group-based social skills intervention that have been applied to address social competence among individuals with developmental disabilities. These groups are typically like a manualized package, and they include behavior analytic approaches like behavioral skills training, modeling, rehearsal, feedback. Some of them also have structured lessons. Some of them also draw on cognitive behavioral therapy approaches. So there's sort of a wide variety of these, and we pulled from some of these group intervention and incorporated some of the aspects of those into the STEM and social skills program. So some of the essential ingredients that have been identified in the literature that we pulled into the program is transferring abstract ideas such as social skills into more concrete ideas. So giving explicit definitions of the skills that we were expecting and teaching, as well as providing explicit video cues for those skills, incorporating structure into the program, so consistent routines, schedules, and concrete tasks to ease transitions between activities. So clear materials or even tables and chairs that were associated with different tasks so that those transitions were a little bit easier. Scaffolding, as we've mentioned, and we did this in the context of the social skills. So thinking about simplified language, providing a lot of models and scripts. And this applied both to teaching those social skills, but also to some of those STEM inquiry processes. So, you know, Anton pointed out that those open-ended questions are great at encouraging the development of inquiry skills. And we think about students with developmental disabilities, this actually is probably an area that can be quite difficult for them. So can we provide them with models and scripts to draw on in order to start to work through that process? And can we simplify the language of those to meet the needs of the specific learner? We provided lots of opportunities for practicing the skills. So multi-sensory opportunities, video, audio, tactile, varieties of activities. So a lot of the things that we did, we changed activities multiple times within a session so that if it wasn't engaging to one student at one time, hopefully the next activity might be, as well as providing changes in the size of the group work. So thinking about dyads versus larger groups and building up those skills for the student. And then thinking about other focused activities. A lot of students that have ASD, so autism spectrum disorder, that participate in the first iteration of our program, a lot of them say, you know, I want to be in STEM, or I want to be a computer programmer or something because I don't have to talk to people. And we really emphasize working in groups and working with others within the program because as we all know, there's no job where you don't get to work with anybody. Even in that stay-at-home time, we're still online talking and having to email and converse with others. So a lot of other focused activities within the program. So those were sort of general principles that we included. And then we had some specific strategies to teach some of those skills. The first one was video modeling. Video modeling has quite a bit of evidence to support its use for teaching social skills to youth with intellectual and developmental disabilities, including autism. There's all sorts of different kinds of video modeling. So it could be watching someone else do things. There's point of view ones where it's from the perspective of the learner. There's ones that include child models and adult models. So there's lots of different options. But basically, we're just recording someone engaging in the target behavior. And we did this in a very discrete kind of way. So the specific skill, the antecedents, the sort of precipitating environment for that skill, the behavior itself that was expected, and the consequence for that behavior. So a nice sort of simple outline of what comes before the social skill, what the social skill is, and what the sort of natural consequence for that social skill would be. Video modeling was used because the videos are presented through technology. So that being, rather than live models, incorporating things like an iPad or a tablet, or we presented ours on projectors, which for some students with developmental disabilities may be either more interesting, so or just less aversive, right? So if you have some difficulty with social skills, sometimes paying attention to two people talking might be more difficult than paying attention to a screen, which you have a bit more interest in. Video modeling is also helpful because we can show an entire group of children the same social interaction, and we can highlight particular behaviors and repeatedly view them. The videos have sort of a specific instruction, so we can narrow down that skill. They capture or target multiple senses, visual, auditory, and of course, we're relying on that research that suggests that they're evidence-based for improving social performance of children with developmental disabilities. The nice thing about video modeling too, thinking to the future, is that if you have good video models, it's easy to share that intervention or technique with others who maybe have less experience directly modeling some of those social skills. So I was also thinking about, oh, what if these STEM programs that already exist want to incorporate some of these ideas? This is a nice strategy that can be beneficial for them. So if you want to develop your own video models, I just have a little brief overview of how that happens. I'm not going to go through each one in detail, but the idea is you need to pick a behavior, plan out that video recording, and then make sure that you're thinking about, do the students have the behavior beforehand? So that's collecting baseline data and measuring their progress as you begin to implement it. So you want to plan that video. You want to make sure that you're targeting skills the students don't have. And then you want to start to use that video in the environment, showing it, monitoring their progress, and then figuring out why the student is or is not making progress, and potentially starting to remove that video model. So for some students, removing the video model is a possibility, and for other students, they might need continued support at brief intervals. But especially for the social skills pieces, we want to think about, can we get rid of that video model eventually and have them engage in that response without the support. This is an example of what one of our videos look like. I know it's not going to play from in here, but basically it's a 10-second clip that demonstrates offering assistance. And I highlight that it's 10 seconds because it's really a short, discrete behavior of offering assistance. It shows the environment beforehand, the student offering assistance to the other individual in the video, and then the consequence for that, which is, a thanks and a continued conversation. So then how do we start to embed these models into our group social skills programs? What we did is we had group themes. So there might be sort of a social skill of the day. In one case, it was offering assistance. And we would incorporate watching that video lesson into the daily schedule. they would observe the video, practice the skill, and then they would have a lot of opportunities to practice that skill during the STEM activities. So we present the video and then we give them opportunities. The facilitators would contrive situations during the STEM activities in order for them to practice that social skill. And in our case, we displayed it on a smart board in order to show those videos to the students. And then we combined some other evidence-based behavior analytic procedures with the video modeling, thinking about rules and routines. So having a consistent weekly routine, using consistent opening and closing formats, having schedules for the group activities, and those concrete tasks I mentioned before. These rules and routines can help establish some clear expectations and also can minimize anxiety or challenging behavior and result in them having increased participation in independence. Because they know what's coming next, they can start to initiate that behavior on their own. We also use task analyses. As I mentioned, this might be just the behavior analytic way of talking about scaffolding, but breaking down tasks into discrete sequence steps. When we think about some of those inquiry skills, a lot of the research focused on science inquiry skills in students with developmental disabilities uses a task analysis, and they implement it through a graphic organizer. And so the task analysis I have here, it's from a piece of research, but it's a really nice example because it shows that we can use it for both the teacher and the students. So the teacher can be prompted to ask students how they're going to gather information about the subject, and the student is expected to tell the teacher how they're going to gather information. And then asking those open-ended questions, what's the same, what's different, tell me about that. And then having those similar kinds of broken down expectations for the student as well. And then combining task analyses with visual support. So a common one used for students with developmental disabilities is a KWHL chart, asking what do we know, what do we want to know, how can we find out, and what did we learn. These provide a support to guide that student. So maybe if we're thinking about Anton's little taxi and car, we're getting closer towards the student being independent, but they've got some support. So they're following along with that visual support, but they're leading it, they're answering these questions. And these have been shown to be an effective method for improving vocabulary and comprehension, as well as supporting independence and engaging in inquiry tasks. But thinking about these inquiry skills, a lot of the research suggests that we really need to pair it with some of these explicit instruction strategies for students with developmental disabilities. So putting them right at the end of that instruction where they're expected to do it independently, we don't see the same success. That this explicit instruction is really important at the beginning for the students. And then I just wanted to finish off by talking about some of the reflections that we've had from the program in terms of the facilitators, the students, the learners with developmental disabilities, as well as their caregivers and parents. So I'm just sort of highlighting some quotes that we have from some of our research. These ones are from our particular facilitators that ran the first iteration of our program. Despite taking classes and an additional qualification course on special needs education, I was unprepared to conduct a classroom of students with ASD. I think this is really highlighting the benefits that our facilitators found from engaging in an interdisciplinary program and research project. They really highlighted how much they learned from one another. They were able to share their individual experiences. They were able to share experiences with individual students or interpretations of behavior with the group, which in turn helped us to understand and respond more appropriately in the following sessions. So they were really pointing out the benefit of being able to work in that interdisciplinary team and learn about the areas of expertise from one another. And then this one is a comment from one of the facilitators about a reflection on what a caregiver said, which they discussed their child's reaction to reading our recruitment flyers, stating that finally someone understood what they were going through. Their child described loving science, but was consciously aware that their communication skills were holding them back in class. For example, they had a lower science mark due to limited collaboration with peers. So not only did our facilitators experience benefit from working in that interdisciplinary team, but they also reflected on the positives that families had expressed to them for participating in the program. In terms of the students, we did a social validity questionnaire where they rated statements about enjoying learning STEM, whether they enjoyed the program to learn about STEM, the skills, and whether they would recommend it. And we saw that the students were generally giving positive ratings. So most of the time, 4s and 5s, but basically 3 or higher. So agreeing to strongly agree for many of the students. And when we looked at their answers to the questions for what were their 3 favorite things about the program, some of them indicated that actual science content was part of their favorite aspects. So my egg survived the drop without becoming my breakfast. I figured out what was making the raisins dance. The buggy race, I won by a landslide. As well as comments about the social skills program. So the animals, the Lego cars, and the cringy videos. And then in terms of parents, we also received positive comments about the format of targeting both science and social skills. So they're learning multiple things without necessarily being aware of all the things they're learning. He hasn't always wanted to learn or interact in an academic setting, and we never had any issues with this program. I think this really speaks to some of Anton's comments about agency and the choice to engage in the program, and that the student is choosing to return to the program because they have the option that they could refuse to participate if they wanted. So I just wanted to end it there with some acknowledgements. So some students who supported the program, Kaylee Lismer, Megan Kufis, Ivory Hart, and Larissa Zwick was involved in the development of some of the video models. And of course, acknowledge our from Shirk and Western University. So I will end it there and open it up to questions if you have. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for the opportunity to share our work with you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Nicole and Anton. I think the comments that you got in the reflections from your participants and the parents and the facilitators really testify to the importance of both the social skills and the inquiry skills that you were teaching students. I see we're close to the end of our hour, but I'm wondering if you two would be willing to hang around online for a few minutes after the hour to answer any questions from the audience.
Yeah, I'm happy to stick around for a few extra minutes.
Yes.
Oh, super, thank you very much. So if some people have to leave us, thanks for joining us tonight. And if you would like to join us for future Let's Talk Education presentations, then please leave your information with Jennifer Heidenheim. If you can stay around for a few more minutes, let's take some questions from the chat. So Anton and Nicole, the chat's visible to you, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. So do you just want to go ahead and take the questions from it as you wish?
Sure. So we haven't continued the group program in a virtual environment. Some other aspects of the research are continuing on. So I do have a student currently working on some individual teaching of STEM inquiry skills using some of these same techniques planned for a virtual environment. I do have some ideas about how it might work online in a group environment, but it's a little bit tricky. So right now we're optimistic that we'll be able to run it in an in-person format soon, but maybe if things continue, we'll consider a virtual one.
Did CPW number 2 have a question? I think they had their hand up and lowered it. If not, that's okay as well.
Yes, I thought I saw that too.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm one of the parents from the session. And I was just wondering, I was late to your presentation. I'm wondering if there's anywhere online that I can see the rest of the presentation.
I believe that Jen is recording the session, so she will make it available to those who either missed portions or didn't come for the whole thing.
Awesome. And A just wanted to say that he had a wonderful time and he would do the session again if he ran it.
Wow.
Oh, wonderful.
Wonderful, yeah.
Can he say hello?
Yes.
Cool. Say hello to Nicole.
Hello.
Hey.
I can't really hear.
Hi.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Wonderful. I see another one asking if there's ongoing participation. I have sort of a set, we have right now, it's only available to students with ASD for our the research ethics that we have, but we will be putting out some calls for participants with other diagnoses in the near future. We're still in the ethics stage of that, so I will be passing along recruitment things eventually, but not currently. Yeah, and Felipe, yes, we will continue. We have lots of plans to continue. We currently have a partnership with the London Children's Museum, so that's where we're hoping to offer some things, as well as some replications of the work we did here, taking all the feedback that we've got and refining it for future iterations. That's a great question. Lots of people with interest, so I will happily take emails. You're welcome to email me at nneil@uwo.ca. I'll put that there. And then if you want to get put on a list to be contacted for future iterations of the study, as well as studies that are on a similar topic, I will happily add you to that list and send out flyers to you.
Felipe, did you have a question as well? Another question?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. I'm one of the parents from one of the kids that participated in this, and he had a great time. So one of the questions was exactly, when would it be continuing this? But then the other thing, Nicole, also is that we are writing a short grant for autism policy. So if you guys are interested in exploring another aspect of the autism universe, it will be a pleasure to have you guys involved in that research as well. Okay.
Yeah. Feel free to email. I will never say no to a conversation about research collaboration.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you for those questions. And thanks especially to the parents and participants who chimed in with their experiences during the question period. Our office will distribute a link to the video recording. So if you've been in the presentation tonight, you'll get a copy of that link that you can follow to see the video. With that, I'll thank Dr. Anton Puvirajah and Dr. Nicole Neal for a fantastic presentation and for the important work they've been doing with these kids. Thank you very much.
Thank you all, and thank you, Perry. Thank you, Jen.
Yes, thank you.